At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
Today, the beverage aisle looks a lot different than it used to. America's beverage companies are working together. We're delivering the options everyone wants. In fact, nearly 60% of beverages Americans buy have zero sugar. You'll find more variety than ever, including more of your favorites, now available with zero sugar. You'll also find more sizes and clear calorie information on the front of every can, bottle, and pack. We know when it comes to finding balance, the more choices, the better.
And, I've talked about this with friends, with siblings, therapists, everybody. It's not my job, right? I can't say for it. It's not my thing. I get that. I do. But I also don't like having these weird conversations and walking on eggshells all the time. Like they were here not that long ago. And we generally, like when everybody's together, it's fine. We don't have to worry about it. But inevitably, the three of us end up getting left for like 20 minutes or half an hour. And it's so painful, Alexis. It's just like, come on.
Yeah.
Sucks. It really sucks.
Those awkward moments.
It really sucks.
Welcome to DNA Surprises, a podcast that delves into the world of unexpected DNA discoveries. I'm your host, Alexis Auersalt. In July 2021, my life took a surprising turn when I found out that I'm an NPE, a person who has experienced a non-paternal event. In other words, my biological father isn't who I thought he was. Join me as we explore the stories of NPEs, adoptees, and donor-conceived people and their families. Get ready to unravel the astonishing journeys that begin with a simple DNA test. This is DNA Surprises. DNA tests, NPE, donor conception, politics. In this week's episode of DNA Surprises, I'm joined by Eric, who learned that he was donor conceived after taking a 23andMe test. He shares why he decided to take the test, why he waited 3 years before doing anything with his surprising results, and how his discovery impacted his relationship with his parents. He also shares how he is connected with his newfound siblings and the larger DCP community. Towards the end of the episode, Eric provides us with a quick history lesson on the origins of donor conception, so be sure to listen. Thank you, Eric, for sharing your story.
My name is Eric Silva Brenneman. I'm 43 years old in the Twin Cities, Minnesota. Where to begin? Well, let's just hit it from there, from the DNA surprise. Then I suppose we can fill in some backstory. It'll be like doing a movie, right? We'll jump in. People have to figure out where they're at in the plot, and then we can do like the backstory.
Exactly. Perfect.
So I'm a multi-ethnic individual, identifies BIPOC. My mother is from the amazing and wonderful country of Brazil, which means that she's a mestiça woman of European, indigenous, and African ancestry. My dad, birth certificate dad, is European settler, typical Midwestern guy. The story there, in terms of that narrative on that side, is that they were Swiss, German, as well as Alsatian, which is, depending on what war was happening, sometimes France and sometimes Germany. And they actually had really, really well documented genealogy, like to the point where I have a photocopy of on the French side. I was the first person that immigrated in like early 1800s. So they kept everything. And the Brenneman side were a Mennonite family back in like the 18th century that as Mennonites, they were pacifists. And if you know your European history, everybody was beating the crap out of everybody at that point. And they were like, we don't want to do this. And so consequently, they were booted as exiles. So they started to move around from what is now like that Swiss German area and eventually made their way to Holland. Met a guy named Penn, as in Pennsylvania. And that's how that story happened. Now, I say all this with great detail, setting it up that none of it's actually connected to me is where we're going.
Right.
But they did a hell of a job, like in terms of keeping that documentation. I will give them credit. So in 2017, I have a wife, I have kids, and I've always wanted to get into more of understanding more of what the backgrounds and the actual meaning of what's behind the nationality, right? Because if you say you're Brazilian, if you say you're American, what does that actually mean, right? There's more depth there than just the nationality. And if we break that down even more in terms of history and politics and colonialism, we can go in a lot of other directions, but I know you have a time limit here. So, the point is, though, I wanted to basically have a better idea of, what is that Africanness? What is that indigeneity? And so my amazing wife and partner bought me a 23andMe Christmas 2017. We were in Atlanta, Georgia, at my cousin's place. Absolutely the key point here that I've mentioned before, and I'll say again, my parents were in the room when it happened. They were present, along with a bunch of other family. Saw me open the gift. Cool, this will be fun. I'll spit in the tube, send it out, which I did. Once again, I repeat, my parents were in the room, said nothing.
Okay.
Did the thing, and you know how it is. It takes like 3 months or whatever. So it was like March-ish of 2018 when the results came back. And what was initially really cool, and we should say too, for those that do have African or indigenous ancestry, things have been getting a little bit better on these tests, but you can even see the Eurocentrism within these tests in terms of the specificity, right? It's like, so for example, I'll just use me as an example. So I got my West African stuff, which is really cool. And it's not a lot, I should be clear. It's like, 10% combined, but it's still 10% that's very dear to me. And it combines all of what is now the Republic of Congo with Angola, which is fucking huge. Like, that is a big landmass. You know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, somewhere between this enormous land were my ancestors.
Right. Yeah.
And then on the European side, it's like, okay, we're going to zero in to Holland. Here's the state. Here's the county. Here's the village. This is probably the address. You know what I'm saying? It's like, gets you right to the thing. That was fun. It was cool to see that and to get a little bit more on the indigenous side. I actually had it flipped in my head, Alexis. I thought I was more native Brazilian than African. It was the opposite. So that was kind of cool to see.
Okay.
And the other one that was hitting, so again, I mentioned the French, German, and Swiss. None of that was on there. However, with that historical narrative that was so well detailed, Holland was a part of the story. It just was like the jumping off point of that family's leaving and immigrating to the United States, to Pennsylvania with Mr. Penn guy. So I saw the Dutch hit, and it hit hard. It hit like, over a third, like 40-something%, 45, something like that. I was like, oh, okay. Well, I mean, you know how it is.
So you attributed, because you try to make it make sense. So you
100%.
thought, okay, Dutch, that's my dad. That's my 100%. Dad's side right there. Okay.
100%. Because it conveniently fit the narrative, right? You've heard this before.
You make it make sense.
Exactly. Brains are silly.
Yes.
And kind of left it at that for a little while, got what I needed and was done. And then it didn't take long, like a matter of days, really. The inbox started popping, right? People are contacting me. What's this all about? Interesting. And, you've heard this story before. So obviously I'm curious who's messaging me. I don't recognize any of these names. Who are these people? And to the person's credit, didn't drop everything all at once, right? Very respectful. Okay. But she came at it and was just like, oh, hey, I see we're related. You have any idea how or why, kind of a thing? I'm like, no, I don't know who you are. How are we possibly related? And this, of course, then spirals into learning that she is my half sister.
Does she disclose it to you?
She did.
She says we are related. Okay. And did she know that she was donor conceived?
She did.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. And I know you haven't gotten to that part yet, but I'm just curious. Okay.
No,
so
we're into it.
So she tells you we are siblings because
Yep. And again, like it was nice of her not to just dump it all on me immediately, to at least slowly kind of work to it. But having said that, by like the second message, it was very much like, drowning in the ocean. It was just a lot. All of it.
What did you think? How were you feeling when you started putting these pieces together?
Oof, out of it completely, disassociated, I think is probably the big word. Just nothing made sense. Nothing made sense outside of myself. I was numb. I was really numb.
Yeah.
And I needed some time, and I was trying to be cool and still interact with her, but I'm also just like, I need a day or two.
What did she share about herself with you?
She let me know a little bit about her background, where she was born, what she knew of the process and the situation, how many of us there are that we know of. I had connected with 3 others, so a total of 4 at that moment. And, fast forwarding, I'm jumping through time a little bit, but they had already established a group, which obviously I'm now a part of. So,
okay, so her message to you said, I'm donor conceived. Mm-hmm. We are siblings. Yep. And there are others. Okay.
Correct. So she within the group, and at this point, this is 2018, the numbers are still moving up and we're still putting things together. But of the however many there were at that time, she was designated to be kind of the ambassador, as it were.
Okay.
And so, I'm lucky that I have a amazing wife and partner and family to support me. But it got to the point where I talked to her and learned more information, and I'm still very much like one foot in one world, one foot in the other. Like it's not quite denial, but it doesn't still make sense to me that my parents would keep something like this from me, that would lie to me in this kind of a way. You know what I'm saying? And I ended up basically, I kind of shut down, Alexis, is what happened.
Yeah. Did you reach out to your parents?
Well, first I took 3 years.
3 years to confront your parents?
Because I'm a parent, like I got life, I'm a musician, I have all these other things, and I'm just like, I don't know how to fit this in. I felt super isolated and alone at that moment. I didn't know about any of the groups. I didn't know about any of the social media stuff at that point. I'm just like, this just ain't it. I can't do this right now. So
did you continue talking to your sister or anything, or were you just like completely shut that part off?
A little bit, but not a lot, because I knew the more that I ruminated and the more that I was in on it, like it was, it creeps into life and starts to kind of become an obsession of sorts,
Okay. Wow. 3 years. That is remarkable. So you just tried not to think about it, and just moved on with your life. What changed after 3 years?
So let's see. So we get to like 2020, 2021 is kind of where everything kind of pops. And, I talk with like my therapist and even professors now too. And it's like, I got hit by 3 shocks kind of all at the same time. And one of my professors just like, any one of those things would be more than enough reason to be seeking therapy and working on things. But they all just like, I have some martial arts and fighting experience. So I parallel it. The metaphor would be like, I got a jab, a cross, and an uppercut, like all together. And I'm just like on the ground and I don't know where I'm at. So those 3 things were obviously the pandemic hitting in 2020 and the isolation. I'm a pretty extroverted social guy, and I kind of prepped myself for a few months, and I was not prepared for year, 2 years plus, whatever it was. And it really, really messed with my head, with my psyche in a lot of ways. Still, I'm getting close to back to where I once was, but I'm not going to lie and say that I'm 100%. Like it fucked me pretty good. It messed me up. And then we had a little thing here in the Twin Cities called the Minneapolis Uprising. I don't know if you remember that, but after Mr. George Floyd's lynching by MPD, which happened, it's within biking distance of where I live. It's very close in my neighborhood, essentially, extended neighborhood. And so we were out and we were, being difficult, I suppose, for state authorities and state actors. But we were also doing what needed to be done in that moment.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily the stress of being out. Like I'm a pretty politically engaged and politically minded activist type individual. Brad left politics for long time. Like this is not my first rodeo, to say the least. But I think I mentioned that just because people think, oh yeah, it was the stress of the lockdowns and all the violence from protesters. And it's like, no, it had nothing to do with that. It was occupation, Alexis. I had Humvees rolling down my street. I had a Black Hawk helicopter on top of my house. I'm trying to put my children to sleep. You know what I'm saying? That is what was stressing me out. And I knew that in the back of my head, obviously I knew, the army wasn't going to like bomb our house, but that's hard to explain to kids. And it's hard to like not think about as well that, yes, it's not Gaza. Yes, it's not northern Syria, but we were getting messages of solidarity from a lot of those places that are under occupation at that point. We're getting a taste of it. You know what I'm saying? And so that was stressful, and that was kind of messing with me too. So that's one. That's two. And then, so that was kind of the breaking point where I was like, I need to talk to somebody. And so I found a therapist, and we're just working through these two things where I kind of just mentioned kind of off the cuff without even thinking much about it, about this DNA thing. And she was very astute. And she's just like, wait, let's go back to that.
Kind of a big deal.
Kind of a big deal. And it quickly became the focus. So that's 1, 2, 3.
When you started really unpacking what the DNA surprise meant for you, what did you discover? What were kind of the first things that happened for you once you started looking at that?
Yeah, she asked a really good question. And she said, I don't want you to answer this right away. It took a few sessions, but she's like, I want you to think about, is this something that you can live with just letting go and not knowing? And if the answer is yes, that's great. We'll move on. But if the answer is no, we still have a lot of work to do.
I really like that though, because she let you define it for yourself as opposed to telling you, wait a second, this is huge. Because for some, it's not, right? Some people are like, yeah, okay, and they move on. Yep. But so I'm assuming you decided this was something.
Yeah, and I think about that as well. Like eventually when I'm doing my own practice, like it was a good approach and something I might bring in as well. And I think it was at least one or two more before I even came with a definitive answer, because I was still like, I don't know, like what's this going to do? This is I'm holding a grenade, basically. What's going to happen here?
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Well, I wanted clarity. I wanted answers. I want to know what was going on. And she's like, okay, great. Well, let's get to work. Okay. And she was really instrumental in helping me go through different scenarios with my parents, because that's what you already kind of alluded to it. That was like the big thing that hasn't happened yet, or at that point hadn't happened yet. How are we going to approach them, talk to them? And she got me really well prepared, I will say. It was tough. I'm fast forwarding now to 2021. It was summer. I was picking my grapes. Remember, we were harvesting. So yeah, August or something, 2021. Hardest conversation I think I've ever had with anyone in general. Can you
take us through that? How did that go?
Yeah, we timed it. Again, my amazing partner, we worked it out where she's like, "Oh, gotta go get some groceries. Bye." The kids and left the house.
Some space.
Yep. Yeah. So I just let them know. Like they obviously knew that I had taken the test, because, as I mentioned, they were in the room, and so I kind of told them, "This is what happened. I met this person. She says this. Can we get a little clarity here? Right? Can you at least confirm or deny is going to be a keyword in a bit. But yeah, I was just trying to get some information, right? Like, what does this mean? And actually there was silence. And my dad he turns and looks, and he gives my mom this look like, the jig's up, basically. Didn't say a word, didn't have to. Like, I knew her there. I was like, okay, that's confirmation.
Yeah.
That's confirmation.
What did they say? Did your dad take the lead? Did your mom speak up?
Yes. My dad was, he was obviously sad and hurt, and confirmed it. And he actually showed, some baseline remorse, which was nice. He's like, I thought many times about telling you, wanted to tell you. And then he's like, yeah, I had fertility issues. The swimmers weren't swimming as well. So we went to a place and did the thing. And my mom at this point she was just very stoic, and she wasn't like fighting what was being said, but she was having a really hard time and kept saying, oh, I forgot. I forgot.
Oh, like she just forgot that they had done that, and in her mind,
yep,
you were your father's biological son, and
just forgot.
Okay.
And then it became the kind of this push-pull with her especially, of giving me little bits and pieces of the truth that actually happened, but then immediately pulling back and denying. Well, can you even trust this thing? What are these tests? They're not real. They're not real. So that'll become a ongoing theme. It was ridiculous, because I'm just like, well, you can't just say that, yes, this happened, and then start to pull back. It's not how this works.
Yeah. I'm curious what the thought, I mean, I assume there's some shame.
Oh, massive shame. Yeah.
Yeah. And denial is very strong. And I don't know your story, but I know in some cases with donor conception, they would mix the sperm. And so there was some plausible deniability at some point.
Yeah. And I'm not sure, like, I haven't even got that much out of them up until present, whether it was that or it was like the direct injection, as it were. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure I will ever get that. So who knows? But it became very difficult, specifically with my mom. Over time, because she really didn't want to talk about this anymore. And then it became a thing of, we have to tell my raised sister. I have a sister. Well, two things there. A, we got to tell her. And then B, like, what the hell? Is she also DCP or what?
Yeah.
And my dad was actually really quick to respond, no, she's not. It's like, oh, really?
And is she older or younger than you?
She's younger.
Okay.
So for whatever reason, the swimmer started swimming again. And there she is. It's like, okay, that's fine. That is what it is, but she still deserves to know. Right? We can't just hold this.
Right. It's the truth about your family.
Immediately shut it down, Alexis. She's like, absolutely not. I'm not telling her. Okay. Why?
That was my next question. Why?
Yep.
Why not?
Yep. Doesn't need to know. Just, it's like, wow. But very, very on the attack, and very, we talk about narratives, right? And I think there's a lot to be said, especially in her case. And this is speculation, to be clear to you and the listeners, but we're dealing with a brown immigrant woman that came to this country in the 60s. And I think there's a lot there that she hasn't even directly confronted and worked through, tied to all of this as well. There's lots of layers, and I don't even try to even attempt to psychoanalyze my mom, because that would just be an absolute nightmare. But deep, there's a lot of deep stuff there to be said. Not just even having have gone through this process as an immigrant, but then the other layers of race and everything. So it kind of was left there, just kind of like, okay, this did happen. Thank you for the bare minimum confirmation, and not really any kind of a apology. My dad, like I said, gave a somewhat of apology, but I have a teenager, and sometimes the teen apology is a thing, you know what I'm saying? And like when I listen to the way my mom like kind of apologized to me, is like, my teenager does a better teen apology than whatever that thing was.
I'm sorry you took it that way, or the non-apology.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
So did you decide to tell your sister anyway, or?
Well, two things happened from this meeting, right? Number one was I immediately like the following day or a couple days after they left, I got in touch with the one sister that had reached out to me. I was just like, let me in the group. Let's go. I want to meet everybody. And so there I was. So now, although I was one of the originals from 2018, because I had my sabbatical of 3 years, as we talked about.
Your processing time.
Correct. Yeah. A bunch of people like came in. So I was actually one of the newbies at that point in 2021, actually getting into it. So I was in our little merry band of pirates, or however you want to call it. We are the Magnificent Seven siblings.
Okay.
I would have been number 7 at that point. We knew there were at the very least 11, including if you include my Ray's sister, it'd be grand total of 12, or I would have been the 12th. So 11 plus me. And that includes 2 of gamete profiteer donor guys' raised kids as well. So, that all comes from just hanging and learning, and we start flowing, right? We start trying to build relationships and talk to one another, and we do our little chat groups, and it's cool. It's weird. It's strange to be like connecting with your siblings in your late 30s and 40s and whatever, but this is the way the world is right now, especially with all with DNA surprises.
Right. Exactly.
This is how it works. We're gonna throw the slogan in there, the trademark. So then the other thing, number 2, then was what to do about my sister, my raised sister, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to tell her, I really did, and we had a conversation because I wanted to tell my children as well at this point, because they see me disappear when I go on these like chat groups with all the new crew, the new siblings, and just like, what the hell's Dad doing? Or why? Who's he talking to? What's going on? They have a right to know. I should tell them.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I, we talked about how we want to do this, and we came to the conclusion that like we can't tell the kids until my raised sister knows, because if we do that, what are we doing? We're perpetuating more generational trauma and giving them another fucking secret,
right,
from their chia. We can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So had to put that on the back burner for a while. But then I had to like start to pressure my parents to like get it together to do something. And once again, it fell on my dad, who again, to his credit, was being cool. And I think 3, maybe 4 months passed. I think it was around like Thanksgiving holiday, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, because they were together. And then he dropped it and let her know. And she called me. Was very supportive. It was just weirded out by the whole thing. Kind of felt bad for both sides, She was just like, I feel bad for you. I feel bad for them. All right, that's fair. I mean, it's a lot. I understand. But at least it was out there. So, again, props to my dad. So literally like that same day, like I got off that call, dinner was sat down, told the kids at dinner.
And what was their reaction?
2 different reactions. Like the youngest thought it was great. She's just like, so I get like massive Christmas presents at this point, right? From all these people. I'm like, well, I don't know. It's a good way to look at it, but I cannot confirm that.
Sure.
She has gotten some, I will say that. And the oldest was a little bit trickier because he's at that point, he was a preteen. And he's got a much more established identity, and he was super getting into his German language and German roots. Very good in the German language, and he still has that through my wife's side. But he, part of his narrative is that he got it from both sides, and now that's not the case. All of a sudden,
So
he was kind of
it shook
bummed.
him too.
Yeah, he was kind of bummed. But I told him, I was like, this doesn't have to change your pursuit. This is one of your passions. This is like, absolutely keep up with the language, and he has. And he's great at it. We're a multilingual family anyway. Portuguese, Spanish, English. I speak a little Japanese, Guarani, Italian. It is French. It's just Tower of Babel over here. Yeah. And my German isn't great. Like I can read it and kind of work through it, but man, he crushes. And so I didn't want him to lose that.
Yeah. And I think that's important to note. The effects that these DNA surprises have are beyond the person, the NPE, the DCP, the LDA who experience it.
Yep.
It's also the children
children.
and their children and so on, and spouses and partners and everyone. You referenced what some people refer to as their donor as the gamete profiteer. Is that how you refer to him as?
Profiteer, yeah.
Profiteer, yeah. So I'm curious about that. Yeah, what is or is there a relationship between you and your genetic biological father?
It's zero. Absolutely nothing.
Okay. Have you identified him?
Yeah, we know him. We know who he is. The group had an idea and had done a lot of the work before I showed up, but then we really put all the pieces together once I was in there. We know who he is. I had a lot of pent up anger issues towards him for a solid year. And I think I've worked through a lot of that. It's still not great. I have issues with him less about doing what he did and more the way he treats his family, because what's happened since, we're just moving through, but we have a rebel auntie, basically a Chia, who was basically the one that gave us all of our medical information and medical history. And she's mostly in contact with the one sister that first reached out, that we started the whole thing with. But, after a solid year of all these chats and everything happened, the sister reached out and she's like, she kind of wants to meet everybody and hang out. All right, let's do it. Bring her in. And so we did. So we've had a couple chats now with Auntie, and she's cool. She's absolutely badass.
Do you all live in the same area, or are you spread out?
Coast to coast,
Okay.
California to Pennsylvania. So one of the things we learned a lot, but I actually have a genetic relative. I have a half sister, Alexis, that lives here in the Twin Cities metro area that doesn't know that I exist. That's Profiteer's daughter, one of them. And so on one of our chats, me and one of my bros, I'm not super hacker guy, neither is he, but you put two of us together, we can do stuff. And within 10 or 15 minutes, we had an address. And because I had an idea, like any large city, metro area, these are big places. We probably never run into each other. It's a place where I run. It's a place where I bike. It's not that far away. I could probably be at her house in 15 minutes on my bike.
Wow.
Yeah.
Have you reached out to her?
I have not, and I'll tell you why. I think just because having gone through this and knowing the trauma and the mind fuckery that kind of comes from it, I don't want to put that on someone. I'm happy to be a source of information. If she finds me and comes to me, I'll absolutely give her whatever she wants, and see if we can even build something from there. But I don't want to show up at her door and drop that bomb. Nah.
Okay. Now, so you mentioned this anger that you had towards the profiteer,
right?
as you call him. So you said the way he treats his family.
Yes. Thank you.
What is that? Yeah.
Right. So there's two things. Number one, obviously, you've heard this before too. This, we're talking about late 70s into the mid 80s of all these massive air quotes donations happening. And so he did it. I think they were, probably told my parents he was a doctor. He was not at that point. He was doing a pharmacy degree. I think he is a medical doctor now, but was not at the time. And, these guys now, the whole thing is we need to protect our family. I don't want my wife to know. I don't want my kids to know. Yeah. And you've heard it before, and as have we all. But now that his sister is a part of our lives and has reached out to us, and he knows that, he's cut her out. So he's no longer, see, that's where I'm going. So she's no longer a part of the family, at least that family. She's disconnected from her nieces, the one of whom, lives here not too far away, and really can't tell me a lot because she's I don't know, I haven't seen or talked to her in 3 or 4 years, however long it's been. See, that's messed up. That's why I mostly have issues. It's okay, you're going to be that kind of an asshole.
And how is the relationship going with your siblings? Have you?
Yeah,
you've
met. Great question.
I know you've met a sister because I've seen pictures on social media. So,
yes, I'm so proud of them. I mean, on one hand, it's really hard, right? Because we talked about it, you're getting into all what should have been, decades ago, having met these people that you're related to. And so you have to weigh those expectations. It's really important. You can't just expect, we're going to be hanging out every single day, not even mention the fact that we're spread out across the entire country. But, I'll tie it into the story, because fast forwarding to like March of 2022, I had a really big blow up with my mom over all of this, and it went bad in all the ways you can imagine. And I let them know, the sibling group know. And then when my one sister, the closest one to me, not that far away, Iowa, I can call them by their names. The first one's California. This is Iowa. Iowa reaches out and she's just like, let's make this real. Let's meet. You're hurting. I want to be there for you. I go, okay, right on. And it took a little while, it took another month or two, but in May of 2022, I went down, spent the weekend, and it ended up being a 2-for-1. So I met her, spent a lot of time with her. And then we have a brother in Nebraska as well that came up. So I got to meet the two of them. And then, since then, the distance factor is kind of a key thing. Like, it's just not that, she's not that far. So we can, I get in the car and be in her backyard in like a decent amount of time. So we've seen each other for working on our 5th or 6th time now. Like, it's becoming normalized to the point that she came up for my daughter's birthday, her niece, in June, which was huge. And I'll never forget that. Like, that was an incredibly memorable moment. And she can't have children. And for her, and it's interesting because, she'd be the first one to tell you she was even exploring the idea of donor conception too. So kind of full circle. But for her to just from nowhere also gain a niece and a nephew, like, she takes it very seriously. And my kids love her, as I do.
That's amazing.
Like,
so you really
phenomenal.
have like a family relationship, like a sibling relationship. That's amazing.
We're really tight. And, I would want something similar with the other ones as well. It's just harder because it takes planning. You know what I'm saying? You got to plan a flight. You got to plan where you're going to stay, all that thing. It's a convenience factor where she's not as far, and we still need to plan. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have anybody in this place, but you just get there faster.
Yeah. And I think it's hard for people who aren't in our positions to understand, but I think one of the biggest comparisons I can probably make is, right, we always talk about how as adults it's hard to make friends because it takes so much energy and we have our lives and you have to plan. And now imagine trying to catch up and try to establish a family relationship with someone that you haven't known. Did you find with your siblings that you had commonality? There's always that nature-nurture conversation.
There's little bits and pieces, but yeah. Like my bro in Pennsylvania, we're both football heads, soccer guys. So we did, the World Cup this past winter. We were nonstop back and forth. We had to pull out of the sibling group chat because I was just like, guys, honestly, like, okay,
it's too much.
This is the one-on-one thing.
Are any of your siblings BIPOC? Because you identify that way. So all of your siblings are white. Correct. Okay. Has that been any part of this journey for you? Has that brought up anything?
A little. Yeah. In fact, that same one that I mentioned, Pennsylvania, we talked about it a little bit. He was, just kind of curious. He's like, how does this make you feel? I'm like, well, I don't feel bad or anything, but it's an obvious thing when we're together and when we're like little heads on a screen that I kind of stick out. And some people claim that we all have similar features, and sometimes I see it and sometimes I don't, because it's just this glaring thing where, like, I'm the brown face that doesn't really look like anybody else. But what it has done is just kind of by chance, back in whenever that was, 2021, like, I'm not even on Facebook anymore, but at that point I'd found the We Are Donor Conceived group, and by chance found this amazing person that was looking for other people of color that might be donor conceived. And for a while, I think it was just the two of us. And then we found a few more. And then they're like, maybe we should start our own little thing. And I'm like, I think we should absolutely start our own little thing.
Yeah.
And so we did.
Because, it is a different journey, and that otherness, even within your own sibling group.
Yep. So that led to the creation of the through donor conceived community. We started our BIPOC DCP group, and that's been wonderful. Like they are fam. It's just weird with all like the post, during, and wherever we are now, and in the pandemic, these things, they blend together, right? And they continue.
Sure.
And so these people that I don't personally know, but much like yourself, like we're hanging, we're building a relationship. Like that group, like they are tight family. Like I really, really care for those people because they've been there for me, and I've been there for them through a lot of things. And yeah.
And we'll be sure to add the link to these resources in the show notes.
Yeah. DonorConceivedCommunity.org.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
There's lots of groups that one just happened to be the one that spoke to me and us, and that we kind of built. And it's been fun to see it grow. I mean, for a long time, it was a tight knit crew of like, 3 or 4 people, and it's still not that big, as you can probably imagine, for a number of reasons, but it's doubled. So like we pop up now with like 8, 9, 10 people. It's just like, oh, look at all these people.
But to go from feeling like there's no one who understands you to, even if it's a dozen people, even if it's one other person, it helps. It definitely helps.
It's huge because now we're not just talking about like all the DCP stuff. We're talking about race. We're talking about class and how those intersect and stuff.
So this is a beautiful segue, because when you reached out to me, one of the things that you really wanted to talk about was this eugenics component, this political component to donor conception. And I would love to give you, some space to talk about that, because
go quickly.
Honestly, before you reached out to me, I'm learning so much about donor conception and the infertility industry since my DNA surprise. And I'm sure a lot of people that are listening are not familiar with some of the things that you're about to share. So can you share more about this?
Absolutely. Thank you. I mean, the simplest way to put it is you can't talk about the fertility industry without talking about eugenics and white supremacy. It's baked in. And I don't mean to apply like, oh, Eric thinks everybody there is a racist. I didn't say that. What I'm saying is, historically, the institution itself is based in these things, much like the United States, or I'll pick on my mom's country of Brazil. These are colonial states based in white supremacy, indigenous genocide, and African slavery, right? Mm-hmm. That's a fact. You can't deny those things. And to that point, we can jump into these things. So this a little, I'm going to try and go chronologically here. And I'll actually start by, you gave me a great setup already, Alexis, because you already said it. Nature versus nurture. You said it. And we say it all the time. I've been guilty of saying it. It's like I'm in the psych department. Like people throw it around all the time. Do you have any idea where that comes from?
Oh, no, but I think I'm about to regret saying it.
It's gross.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to talk about a lot of shitty people. So this is from a man named Sir Francis Galton. I don't know if you know that name, 1822, 1912. So Galton, his biggest claim to fame is that he rode the coattails of his older cousin, a guy named Charles Darwin.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, Darwin, we do know him. And Darwin himself, not great when it comes to race either. A racist for sure. He gets a little bit better towards the end. But back to his little cousin here, Galton. So he is considered like the father of eugenics. Like it kind of existed, but he gave it a name and kind of proselytized it and like took it out to the world or whatever. Nature versus nurture is his thing, coins that. He also starts this idea of, it's kind of funny because he calls it social Darwinism, even though his cousin is doing nothing with it. He just uses his name. Like I said, he's just riding his coattails.
Riding the coattails, yeah.
Completely. And you can imagine what that is. He's basically leading to scientific racism. This is the guy that eventually comes up with the idea that African people have smaller brains because they have smaller heads and deserve to be oppressed. Like, This is his whole thing. And he believes in that strict hierarchy, as you can imagine, like with Darwinism, social Darwinism, eugenics. He wants like the perfect beings, and obviously none of those are going to be anybody that looks like you or I, Alexis.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Here's a quote. This is him, and it's full of double negative because it's like, 19th century English guy talking, but I think you'll pick it up. So he says, quote, "There exists a sentiment, for the most part, quite unreasonable, against the gradual extinction of an inferior race." So he's basically saying genocide's cool.
Yeah.
That's your nature versus nurture.
Okay, well, I'm going to strike that from my vocabulary.
I don't think you have to strike it. It's just you got to be conscious of it too, because
Right.
it's important to know where these things come from.
and that's the difficult thing, right? Is that a lot of our foundations of everything, honestly, start from that place, and then they evolve, not to play on Darwin right there, but it does change. All right, keep going.
So the next one I got is Davenport. Do you know the name Charles Davenport?
I don't know that name. No.
So he's from the U.S. He's 1866 to 1944, and listeners are probably like, "Oh, Eric's going to talk about the Nazis." It's like, you know what? I'm going to briefly mention the Nazis just because it's so easy. Like, I'm giving you all the buildup basically to what gets to that point. So this dude loved him some Galton. Like, he read, absorbed everything, like, disciple. But his big thing, again, from the U.S., this is directly tied to you and I, anybody that identifies as BIPOC in whatever respect that may be. He was, everything about his being was against miscegenation. Absolutely opposed in every single way to ethnocultural race mixing. That was his mantra. He actually called it a biological problem. Those are quotes. And he lobbied Congress in 1924 for the Immigration Act, which actually, this ties into, you'll remember, like, a number of Jewish folks that were turned away during, like, before the actual things were starting to get heated up. Like, that was a part of that act. So, like, he passed that actual thing to, like, prevent anybody that wasn't basically a WASP of entering the country. And I put in here, he could have been pushed aside to history, and we wouldn't even know the name if it weren't for another extremely famous racist that threw lots and lots of money at him. A guy by the name of Andrew Carnegie. Fully funded.
Name. Yeah.
Fully funded by Andrew Carnegie.
Interesting. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So this kind of leads into, like, he starts getting into communication too with the Third Reich. He actually becomes the editor of a German journal in 1935. I'll just leave that there. He had no issues with whatever they were doing. I put in here just around this time, 1884. This is where the first artificial insemination actually happens. No consent, of course, from I think it was a Quaker, actually, a Quaker wife. And then we can fast forward, but the first frozen situation happened in the 50s in Iowa, which is, I only bring that up because, like, I got fam in Iowa. I was conceived in Nebraska. Like, these, like, the worlds start to combine. Yeah, it all kind of comes together. And it was livestock, right? It was a dude that had worked with bulls and, like, protecting and shipping, like, his bull semen. It was just like, you know what? I think I can do this with people. And then the scientists are like, these guys, a lot of these descendants of these geneticists are like, we should look into that. Brewer, we don't talk too much about him. He attempted to be cool with it and, like, say, no, eugenics socialism can work. And because he was still, like, a white guy and pretty racist, it just didn't. And then we get to Mengele finally. That's a name that probably a lot of people know. Joseph Mengele, 1911, 1979. Lebensborn project with the Nazis, with the fascists, like, that was his baby. I think enough said there. And this one's kind of personal to me because he ends up in South America, in the Southern Cone. He ends up in Argentina, and he actually dies in Brazil, a free man. And at this whole time, he's still performing, like, terrible experiments on native folks, on Black folks. I mean, he's doing horrible things. And 53 was the first frozen. I did put it in here, and I just brought it in here just to say, in terms of, like, the lack of diversity within the industry, which is kind of where this is kind of leading to. And this is 2000s. This is already old data. They're talking about 70% of the population being European, 80% donors, 12% Black, only 5% donors of Black or African descent, 12% Latino, only 2% donors, Latinx, and then Asian, 4% of the population, and actually a little bit higher, 8% of donors, which again, 20 some years old, these numbers have probably fluctuated a little bit, but it's a good indication of how unequal and inaccessible a lot of options are, especially for people of color, regardless of, you know, how you identify, what your sexual orientation is. Like, it's really hard. Like, my mom didn't have an option. No option whatsoever back then.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It was, she pretty much only could choose a white donor, which if they wanted to mirror your father, I suppose
that's right.
that worked.
They would have anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. With the knowledge that you have, I mean, you've dived deep into the history of, you know, how we got here with assisted reproduction. What are your feelings on donor conception? Personally, like,
you try to take it another hour here, girl.
I know it's broad, but like, personally, is it something that you support for yourself, for friends, for family? If somebody came to you and said, I'm thinking about using donor gamete, what is your personal stance on that?
Yeah, you know, because I have so many friends in the LGBTQ plus community, like, I'm absolutely going to support them. Of course. Like, they have just as much right as anyone to be parents, and they're probably better parents than most heteronormative couples, frankly. So of course, it just needs to be done in the correct manner. You know, look for a known donor, open situation, like baseline, like that should happen, right? No more of this anonymity bullshit. Like, that's like the main thing I think we're trying to eradicate right now. There's other things as well. And to be somewhat fair, I don't want to be too harsh on the industry. Things have evolved and they have done some good stuff. You know, a lot has changed in 4 decades. Is it enough? Not even close. There's tons of work still yet to be done.
Yeah.
So I'm not, if you're asking, do I want to end gamete donation? I don't think so. Like, I don't think that really, again, going back to what I said previously, that's going to directly affect people that want to have a family for legitimate reasons, and they may not be able to do it in traditional means. And that's not fair.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just like to ask the question to people who are donor conceived, because I think your voices matter the most, right?
It's hard.
Your voices matter the most in this situation.
Yeah. I actually read a piece, like, I used an article last semester of, I don't have it off the top of my head, but like his whole thesis was just like, we need to end the entire industry and cut this out. I'm just like, and there are parts of it, there was some actual really good logic in there. I was like, okay, but you're not thinking about what we just talked about. Like, this is, if this were to happen, there's going to be a bigger seismic impact that you're not seeing.
Yeah. Yeah. Where would you say you are now, just overall, on how you feel about yourself, your journey? How are you emotionally and mentally?
Oh man. I mean, I feel generally good. I do. I feel complete. I'm glad that I can be out and open, because I wasn't for a certain amount of time. And you know what? It was meeting my siblings in person changed so much, because they're so cool and so wonderful. And I'm so proud to have them in my life. I mean, when I watch my hermana, she's my hermana, so I call her, she's the Chia. When I watch her with my kids and I get to see the love there and the bonding, and just like, I'm not going to keep that a secret. That's beautiful and that's wonderful. So that has been a gift. I think what's hard is still dealing with my parents, specifically my mom, and trying to get her more just in out of the matrix and in the real world. It's tough. Yeah. It's like it's an ongoing battle. I think she'll get there, and I hope we can get past it and get back to a semblance of the way the relationship was before. You know, it may never be the same again, but we can do better than this.
This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
Support comes from ServiceNow. We're for people doing the creative work they actually want to do. That's why this ad was written and read by a real person and not AI. You know what people don't want to do? Boring, busy work. Now with AI agents built into the ServiceNow platform, you can automate millions of repetitive tasks in every corner of your business, IT, HR, and more, so your people can focus on the work that they want to do. That's putting AI agents to work for people. It's your turn. Visit servicenow.com.
Yeah, I hope that for you. I hope that for you.
Just life is weird, and you got to be ready for it.
That's like so true.
As soon as you think, like, identity is fascinating, and you know, if you would have asked me 5 years ago that I'm gonna like start a counseling program and I'm gonna become a therapist, I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? I don't have any interest in any of that. I'm a musician, like, you know what I'm saying? Like I talk football, I do all these other things. I have no interest in that at all. Like 5 years later, my entire world is like flipped on its head.
That's the truth.
So be ready for the psychological judo, because you're probably going to need it regardless if there's a DNA surprise or not. But if there is one, you're absolutely going to need it.
Absolutely. All right. What advice do you have for parents who may be keeping a DNA surprise, such as donor conception, from their child?
You got to tell. Absolutely tell. Age appropriate, earlier the better. You know, my Iowa sister, I think, got it the best. She learned when she was a toddler, 3 years old. That's the time. I would have taken 18. You know, we're passing a lot of legislation right now. We're moving a lot of interesting things throughout the country, and 18 seems to be kind of the focus and the key. And I think that's fine. I mean, again, I still think earlier is better, but I would have loved 18. There's not a perfect time. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But finding out in your late 30s into your 40s and 50s, it's the impact hits so much harder, and it's still going to suck at 18. I mean, you're still you got 1 foot in childhood and 1 foot in adulthood. It's not going to be easy, but again, like, no time is easy. So tell the children young, you know, get the language moving when they're toddlers, in grade school, whenever it is. So it's not that big of a deal. Normalize it.
Yeah.
You know, I can only speak to what we're doing now with the relationship with Iowa in particular. Is just like, we talk about her as the Chia. You know what I'm saying? She's a part of the family. She's fully integrated. We're already planning the next trip. Kids can't wait. This is how it is.
That's awesome. Thank you. And what advice do you have for your fellow DCP who maybe just found out through a DNA test that they're donor conceived?
That's so important, Alexis. Thank you. You please reach out. Reach out to me. Reach out to the We Are Donor Conceived. Reach out to Donor Conceived community. Reach out to Donor Conceived Council. Just reach out. Don't stay isolated. I did it for 3 years for my own reasons, and I can look back and say I probably shouldn't have waited that long, but I'm glad I found my people. But just be cognizant that your people are out there, and everybody's ready and willing to embrace you. So find us. We're here. We're here for you.
That's amazing. Eric, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for being so vulnerable to share your journey, and also to educate the listeners who maybe didn't know about some of the origins of reproductive assistance. And I'll
ongoing, isn't
carefully.
it?
I will think more carefully the next time I say nature versus nurture. That's for sure. But no, thank you so much. I wish you the best, and I hope
Likewise.
I really do hope that things get better and better with your parents.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's kind of you. No, I just wanted to mention that it's super important, the work that you are doing also, Alexis, with your podcast and all the other podcasts and like the broader MPE community, because in terms of, like I said before, of not feeling isolated and feeling a part of community, you do that. Your program does that. You are doing that. So
thank you.
Kudos to you.
Thanks again to Eric for sharing his story. If you have a DNA surprise story that you'd like to share, please submit your story at DNASurprisespodcast.com. Until next time.